What happens when the school's biggest bully targets the new kid in front of everyone, only to find out he picked a Taekwondo champion? The first thing people noticed wasn't the backpack slung over his shoulder or the fresh sneakers on his feet. It was the way Jordan Matthews carried himself when he walked into the Ridgeview High cafeteria that Tuesday afternoon. Straight back, calm expression, quiet, but unmistakable presence. For a 17-year-old transfer student, that was unusual. Most kids entering a new school looked nervous, eyes darting around, searching for a place to belong. Jordan didn't look nervous at all. He looked certain, and that certainty was exactly what drew every eye in the room. The cafeteria smelled like reheated pizza and overbrewed coffee, the usual lunch mix. But the air felt different the moment he stepped through the door. He wasn't just new. He was different in a way that made people whisper, some curious, some judgmental. Ridgeview High in Temecula, California wasn't known for being diverse. New faces stood out quickly, especially someone like Jordan, black, athletic, and walking with the quiet composure of someone who knew who he was. Jordan grabbed a tray and made his way toward the food line. Students shifted, staring, but pretending not to. He could feel the weight of it, though he didn't let it show. He'd dealt with this before, new towns, new schools, new stairs. His father's job meant moving around often, and each school carried the same test. Would they accept him, or would someone try to push him down? He found a seat at the far end of the cafeteria, sliding into a chair with measured calm. For a few minutes, everything was normal. He opened his juice carton, tore into a sandwich, and kept to himself. But new students were rarely left alone for long in Ridgeview. That's when Ethan Collier spotted him. Ethan was one of those kids whose reputation carried ahead of him like a shadow. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of teenager who looked more like a college linebacker than a high school senior. His laugh was loud, his words often cruel, and he had a habit of targeting anyone who couldn't fight back. To Ethan, the cafeteria wasn't just a place to eat, it was a stage, and humiliating others was his favorite performance. "Look at the new guy," Ethan muttered to his friend Ryan Blake, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "sitting all serious like he owns the place." Ryan chuckled, but kept his eyes on his fries. Even Ethan's closest friends knew when not to encourage him. But Ethan had already made up his mind. He grabbed his coffee cup, still steaming, and strolled across the room with the swagger of someone who thought no one could touch him. Conversations dropped to murmurs as kids realized where he was heading. A new kid, a known bully, a cafeteria full of witnesses. Jordan looked up just as Ethan stopped in front of him. For a brief moment, their eyes locked. Jordan's were calm, steady, unflinching. Ethan smirked, sensing a chance to make a scene. "Welcome to Ridgeview," Ethan said, holding his coffee loosely in one hand. "Hope you don't mind a little warmth." Before Jordan could respond, Ethan tilted his cup forward, spilling hot coffee across Jordan's tray. The liquid splashed, soaking the sandwich, dripping onto the table, staining his hoodie. The cafeteria went silent. Gasps echoed through the room. Some kids laughed nervously, others looked away. A few raised their phones, ready to record. Ethan grinned, expecting anger, maybe even a shove. That's what made it fun for him, the reaction. But Jordan didn't move the way most kids would. He didn't jump back. He didn't shout. He didn't even look at his hoodie. He simply placed his hands on the table, steady, like nothing had happened. The silence stretched. Jordan's calmness unsettled Ethan more than a punch would have. The bully's smirk faltered, just slightly, as he leaned in closer. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, his voice sharp. "Too scared to say something?" Jordan's reply was quiet but clear. "You're not the first to try me. You won't be the last." A murmur rippled through the cafeteria. It wasn't the words that struck them. It was how he said them. Calm, confident, like someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. And Ethan, for the first time in a long time, didn't know what to do. But the real turning point hadn't arrived yet. That moment was only seconds away. The cafeteria was still buzzing from what had just happened, coffee dripping from the table, the smell of scorched liquid rising in the air, and all eyes fixed on the new kid who refused to play Ethan Collier's game. But Ethan wasn't done. If anything, Jordan's composure only stoked his anger. A bully like Ethan lived for reactions, panic, tears, fear. Jordan's steady calm had stripped that satisfaction away, and now Ethan needed to push harder. Ryan Blake, still sitting at their usual table near the center, called out nervously, "Hey man, let it go." Teachers are watching, but Ethan shot him a glare sharp enough to silence him. "Relax. I'm just getting to know our new friend." He turned back to Jordan, who was dabbing at his hoodie with a napkin, his movements deliberate, patient. Jordan looked up once more, eyes steady. "You don't even know me," he said. "Don't need to," Ethan snapped. "I can tell what you are." Another kid thinking he's better than everyone else. The cafeteria stirred again. Conversations turned into whispers. Forks clinked against trays. Everyone sensed something bigger was about to happen. A group of freshmen at the back leaned forward, wide-eyed, while upperclassmen at nearby tables pulled out their phones, eager for drama. Jordan stayed silent for a long moment, and then he asked, "You ever get tired of this?" The question caught Ethan off guard. "Tired of what?" "Acting like this," Jordan said evenly. "Picking people, trying to make them smaller. Doesn't it wear you out?" A few kids stifled laughter, not at Jordan, but at the fact he dared to speak back in front of everyone. No one talked to Ethan like that. Ethan sneered, stepping closer. "You think you're smart, huh? Let me teach you how this works." He grabbed the edge of Jordan's tray and shoved it hard, sending food skidding across the table. A half-soggy sandwich slapped onto the floor. Someone gasped out loud. Still, Jordan didn't rise. His hands rested calmly on the table's edge. His breathing didn't change. That composure made Ethan's fists clench tighter, itching for a reaction. At the far corner of the room, Mrs. Daniels, the assistant principal, had just walked in. She stood frozen for a second, watching the tense standoff, clearly debating whether to intervene or let it play out. Ridgeview wasn't short on bullying incidents, but rarely did she see someone stand against Ethan in this way. Meanwhile, Ryan muttered under his breath, "He should have just kept his head down." But the girl sitting next to him, Sophie Delgado, shook her head. "No," she whispered. "He's handling this better than anyone else ever has." Ethan leaned in until he was just inches from Jordan's face. "Say something. Or are you too scared to open your mouth?" Jordan finally pushed back his chair and stood, slow and steady. He wasn't taller than Ethan, but he carried himself differently, balanced, grounded, every movement deliberate. His voice was calm, but it carried across the room. "I don't fight to entertain you," Jordan said. "I fight to defend myself if I have to." That sentence hung in the air like a storm cloud. Some kids shivered, not because of the words, but because of the certainty behind them. Ethan let out a sharp laugh. "Defend yourself? From me? You don't stand a chance." Jordan didn't blink. "Try me." A hush spread across the cafeteria. Phones tilted higher, every kid desperate to catch the moment. Even Mrs. Daniels hesitated, her hand frozen halfway to her walkie-talkie. Ethan shoved Jordan hard in the chest. Jordan stepped back, but he didn't stumble. He steadied himself instantly, feet planted firmly, shoulders squared like he'd practiced it 1,000 times before. The stance wasn't something random. It was controlled, purposeful. Some students noticed, whispering to each other. Ryan's eyes widened. "Wait a second. I think he knows something. Look at the way he's standing." Sophie nodded slowly. "That's not just confidence. That's training." Ethan, oblivious, was winding up for another shove, maybe worse. But what no one realized yet was that Jordan Matthews had been practicing Taekwondo since he was 8 years old. He wasn't just another new student. He was a state-level champion who understood balance, control, and restraint better than anyone in that cafeteria. Jordan's next move would change everything. But before it did, the tension in the room had to reach its breaking point, and Ethan wasn't backing off. The cafeteria air was so thick with tension, you could practically hear hearts beating. 100 eyes locked on two students, one a bully used to getting his way, the other a transfer kid who hadn't even made it through his first week at Ridgeview High. The silence dragged long enough that even the lunch ladies stopped serving food, hands frozen mid-scoop. Ethan Collier puffed up his chest like he owned the place, leaning forward with a sneer. "What's the matter, new kid? Cat got your tongue?" His words dripped with mockery, but his tone carried a flicker of unease. Jordan Matthews didn't flinch. He held Ethan's stare, steady and unshaken. Then, in a voice just loud enough for the room to hear, he said, "You spill coffee on me and think that makes you strong." Strength isn't measured in how much you can humiliate someone, it's measured in how much you can control yourself. The cafeteria erupted in whispers. Some kids looked impressed, others laughed nervously, unsure if Jordan had just signed his own death warrant. Ethan's smirk faltered. He hated when someone stole the attention he craved. And right now, every phone pointed at Jordan, not him. He needed to win the crowd back, and he knew exactly how. Escalate. With a sudden motion, Ethan grabbed the front of Jordan's hoodie with both hands and yanked hard, trying to pull him off balance. Gasps filled the room. A few kids shouted, "Fight! Fight!" Chairs scraped the floor as students rushed closer to form a circle. Jordan didn't resist at first. He let Ethan tug him forward, but then he planted his feet, bending his knees slightly. It looked effortless, but it was calculated. Ethan's grip only tightened, his frustration boiling over. "Say something now," Ethan barked. Jordan's voice stayed calm. "You really don't want to do this." That line landed differently. It wasn't a threat, not in the way most fights began. It sounded more like a warning, firm but controlled. Ethan laughed harshly, mistaking it for weakness. "Oh, I think I do." He shoved Jordan hard toward the table. Plates rattled, juice spilled, and yet Jordan spun lightly on his heels, regaining balance before his shoulder could slam into the edge. It was quick, fluid, almost too clean for a kid who was supposedly untrained. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Did you see that?" He moved like he knew what was coming, Sophie whispered from the sidelines. Ryan shook his head. "Nah, that was luck." "Has to be." But it wasn't luck. It was years of Taekwondo training baked into Jordan's reflexes. Every step, every angle of his body was measured, deliberate. He wasn't just avoiding Ethan's attacks, he was studying him. Ethan's face reddened as laughter trickled through the cafeteria. Not everyone was laughing at Jordan. Some were laughing at Ethan's failure to knock him down. That humiliation stung more than any shove could. "You think you're slick, huh?" Ethan growled. He raised his fist, ready to throw the first punch. Phones shot higher into the air. Some kids screamed, "Teacher's coming!" But no one stepped in yet. Even Mrs. Daniels lingered near the doorway, hands still hovering over her walkie-talkie, watching closely. Jordan raised his hands, not to fight, but to shield. Palms open, posture defensive, a stance anyone familiar with martial arts would recognize immediately. He wasn't squaring up to strike, he was bracing to block. "Don't make me hurt you," Jordan said softly, almost pleading. Ethan barked out a laugh. "Hurt me? You? That's rich." Then he swung. The punch cut through the air, fast and heavy, but Jordan moved faster. He sidestepped at just the right angle, redirecting Ethan's momentum with a subtle twist of his arm. Ethan stumbled past him, nearly losing his footing. The crowd gasped in unison, a chorus of disbelief. Jordan didn't strike back. He didn't need to. His calm, precise movement was enough to send a message. He wasn't just another kid. He was trained, disciplined, dangerous if he wanted to be. Ethan spun around, fury flashing in his eyes. "You think you can embarrass me like that?" His voice cracked with anger. Jordan shook his head slowly. "I'm not embarrassing you. You're doing that to yourself." That sentence hit harder than any punch could. Students covered their mouths, some whispering, "Oh my God," others smirking at Ethan's humiliation. Ethan's face twisted with rage. He lunged again, but before he could connect, a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" Mrs. Daniels had finally stepped forward, her heels clacking against the tile floor as she broke into the circle. "Collier! Matthews! Both of you, stop this now!" The crowd groaned in disappointment, but the tension didn't fully break. Phones lowered, murmurs spread, and all eyes stayed glued to the two boys. Ethan released a frustrated growl, but backed off a step. Jordan lowered his hands, exhaling slowly through his nose. And though the fight never truly began, every student in that cafeteria knew they'd just witnessed something different. Jordan hadn't thrown a single punch, but somehow he'd left Ethan Collier rattled in front of the whole school. But this wasn't over yet. Ethan's pride had been bruised, and bullies with bruised pride rarely walk away quietly. The cafeteria might have returned to its usual noise within minutes, but the energy had shifted completely. Word of the near fight spread down the hallways faster than the morning announcements ever could. By the last period of the day, everyone at Ridgeview High seemed to know. The new kid didn't back down from Ethan Collier, and he did it without even throwing a punch. Jordan Matthews walked through the halls afterward like nothing had happened, but inside he knew this wasn't over. Bullying rarely ended with a single incident, especially when the bully's pride was wounded in front of an audience. He tried to focus on his English class, scribbling notes, but he could feel eyes on him. Whispers trailed behind him like shadows. Curiosity, respect, suspicion. Some students admired the way he'd handled Ethan. Others muttered that he must have gotten lucky. But Ethan wasn't muttering. He was seething. Later that afternoon, in the locker room before gym, Ethan slammed his fist into a metal locker so hard it echoed down the row. "He made me look stupid," he snarled. Ryan, sitting on the bench, looked nervous. "Dude, just let it go. Daniels is already watching you. One more stunt and you're out for suspension." Ethan whirled around. "You think I care about suspension?" Everyone saw that. Everyone's talking like he's some kind of hero. I'm not letting him get away with that. Ryan sighed, knowing better than to push back. Ethan had already decided. Meanwhile, Jordan tied his sneakers quietly, his bag tucked under the bench. Sophie Delgado, who sat 2 rows over, leaned closer. "You all right?" she asked softly. Jordan glanced up, surprised. "Yeah, why?" She gave him a look. "You know why. Half the school's talking about you." Jordan shrugged. "People talk. Doesn't mean I need to listen." Sophie hesitated, then said, "Ethan won't stop. He's embarrassed. Guys like him don't let stuff like this slide." Jordan's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "I know, but I'm ready for him." The whistle blew and Coach Harrison barked orders for everyone to line up in the gym. The air smelled of rubber floors and faint sweat, basketballs bouncing in the distance. Jordan took his place, aware of Ethan glaring from 2 rows down. Gym started like usual, warm-ups, stretches, drills, but the tension simmered just beneath the surface. Coach Harrison eventually split the class into teams for a game of basketball. Fate, or maybe bad luck, placed Jordan and Ethan on opposing sides. From the first pass, it was clear Ethan had one goal: humiliate Jordan. He threw elbows, body-checked harder than necessary, shoved when the coach's back was turned. Jordan absorbed it all, his face unreadable, his movements precise. Every time Ethan tried to knock him off balance, Jordan adjusted seamlessly, slipping around him with quiet grace. The crowd of students sitting on the bleachers started noticing. Murmurs turned into comments. "He moves different," someone whispered, "like he's trained." Finally, the breaking point came. Jordan dribbled past 2 defenders and cut toward the hoop. Ethan charged straight at him, slamming his shoulder forward. The impact should have sent Jordan sprawling, but it didn't. In a fluid motion, Jordan shifted his weight, pivoted on his heel, and redirected Ethan's momentum. Ethan stumbled off course, crashing into the padded wall with a loud thud. Gasps echoed through the gym. Coach Harrison blew his whistle sharply. "Collier, enough." But Ethan was already back on his feet, red-faced and panting. "You think you're better than me?" he shouted, storming toward Jordan. Jordan didn't back up. He stood tall, voice calm. "I don't think I'm better. I just know who I am." That answer only fanned the fire. Ethan lunged again, hands clenched into fists. For a split second, the gym held its breath, expecting a punch. Instead, Jordan raised his arms, not in aggression, but in the poised stance of someone trained to defend. The motion was so deliberate that it silenced the room. Everyone recognized it now. This wasn't just luck or balance. This was martial arts. Jordan's voice cut through the gym, steady and unshaken. "I don't want to fight you. But if you keep pushing me, you're going to find out the hard way that I'm not the one to mess with." The weight of his words landed heavily. Ethan froze mid-step, his chest heaving, his fists trembling. The room erupted in whispers, shock, awe, disbelief. For the first time, Ridgeview High had seen someone stand toe-to-toe with Ethan Collier, and it wasn't with brute force. It was with calm, controlled strength. Coach Harrison barked again, louder this time. "Collier, sit down." Now, reluctantly, Ethan stopped, his glare burning holes through Jordan. But the message had already been delivered. Jordan wasn't just some quiet new kid. He was something Ethan couldn't bully, someone disciplined, unshakable. The game stumbled back into motion, but no one cared about the score anymore. Every eye lingered on Jordan, curiosity mixing with newfound respect. Ethan sat on the bench, fuming, plotting his next move. But deep down, even Ethan was starting to realize this wasn't a fight he could win the way he wanted. And that truth only made him more dangerous. By the time the final bell rang that day, Ridgeview High felt like it had lived through an entire week of drama. Students spilled into the hallways buzzing with conversation, their voices rising over the slamming of lockers and squeaks of sneakers. Every story seemed to circle back to one thing: Jordan Matthews and the way he handled Ethan Collier in front of the whole school. Jordan walked through the halls quietly, head down, earbuds in, hoping to slip out unnoticed. But that wasn't going to happen. "Hey, you really train or something?" a kid from his math class asked, jogging to catch up with him. Jordan just shrugged. "Something like that." Behind him, two juniors whispered, "He barely even touched Ethan." "Did you see the way he moved?" That wasn't normal. Jordan heard them, but he kept walking. He'd learned long ago that answering every question only fed the rumors. Instead, he focused on the beat of the music in his ears, letting it drown out the chatter. Still, he couldn't ignore Sophie Delgado when she caught up with him at the front steps. She was one of the few who had spoken to him with kindness that day. "You know you're basically a legend now, right?" she teased, falling into step beside him. Jordan gave her a sidelong look. "I don't want to be a legend. I just want to finish school in peace." Sophie smirked. "Good luck with that. Ridgeview eats stuff like this up. They'll be talking about it for weeks." Jordan stopped for a moment, scanning the parking lot. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the rows of cars. He sighed. "That's what I was afraid of." Because attention, in his experience, didn't always bring friends. Sometimes it brought more enemies. And sure enough, across the lot, he spotted Ethan leaning against his truck, arms crossed, face still flushed with humiliation. Ryan stood nearby, clearly trying to talk him down, but Ethan's glare stayed locked on Jordan. Sophie noticed too. "He's not going to let this go," she murmured. Jordan shook his head. "I know." He turned to her, his tone serious but calm. "That's why I can't slip up. One wrong move, and he wins." That evening, at home, Jordan sat at the kitchen table with his mom. She had noticed the coffee stain on his hoodie the moment he walked in. "What happened?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. Jordan hesitated, then explained the cafeteria incident: the coffee, the shove, the near punch. He didn't exaggerate, but he didn't downplay it either. His mom listened carefully, then placed her hand over his. "I'm proud of you," she said, "not for standing up to him, for standing in control. That's harder than throwing a fist." Jordan nodded slowly. "It's just, I know this isn't over." She gave him a knowing look. "That's the thing about bullies. They always come back, but when they do, you don't have to meet them with anger. Meet them with discipline. That's what your training was for." Her words settled in his mind, reinforcing what his years of Taekwondo had taught him. The fight isn't about proving you're stronger. It's about proving you're in control of yourself. Back at Ridgeview the next day, the cafeteria was buzzing with speculation again. Kids leaned over trays, replaying the moment Ethan stumbled into the wall, sharing videos they'd posted to Snapchat the night before. Some clips had already racked up hundreds of views. Ryan sat with his group, lowering his voice as Ethan slammed his soda can onto the table. "Man, just let it go. The whole school's talking, but if you come after him again, it'll backfire." Ethan's jaw flexed. "He humiliated me. Do you get that?" "Everyone's laughing behind my back." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "They're not laughing at you, they're impressed by him." There's a difference that only made Ethan's face darker. "Same thing. I'm not done with him. Not by a long shot." Meanwhile, Sophie sat across from Jordan at another table, picking at her salad. "So, you're not going to say anything? Not going to tell people you're like an actual Taekwondo champ or something?" Jordan shook his head firmly. "The less they know, the better." "Why?" she pressed. "Because if I tell them, it turns into a show. I'm not here to perform for anyone. I just want to be treated like a student, not a story." Sophie studied him for a moment before nodding. "That's actually kind of cool." Jordan offered the faintest smile. "It's just who I am." But while he sat calmly, eating his lunch and ignoring the phones pointed his way, Ethan was already planning his next move. The cafeteria incident had bruised his ego. The gym had stripped away what was left, and now he was determined to regain control the only way he knew how, by escalating things further. But what Ethan didn't realize was that every attempt to break Jordan only revealed more of his strength, and soon, the whole school would see a confrontation they wouldn't forget. By the end of the week, tension at Ridgeview High had built to the point where it felt like the whole school was waiting for something to erupt. Every hallway conversation circled back to Jordan and Ethan. Videos of the cafeteria standoff and the gym incident had spread online, edited with captions and music. Jordan hadn't asked for any of it, but now he was the kid who shut Ethan Collier down. And Ethan? He hated every second of it. Friday afternoon, the gym was alive with the echoes of sneakers squeaking against polished wood. Classes had been excused early for a school spirit pep rally, and students filled the bleachers, chanting, laughing, buzzing with energy. The basketball team scrimmaged for the crowd, cheerleaders clapped and spun, and for a while, the school felt like it had slipped into normal excitement. But in the back of the gym, near the double doors, Ethan leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on Jordan. His friends kept a cautious distance. They'd seen him like this before, quiet, simmering, ready to blow. Jordan, meanwhile, sat near the edge of the bleachers, blending into the crowd. He wasn't cheering or clapping, just watching with the same calm he always carried. Sophie slid into the seat beside him, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "He's staring at you again." Jordan didn't look. Let him. "You know he's going to try something, right?" Jordan finally glanced at her, his voice level. "I know. That's why I'm ready." The scrimmage ended, the gym buzzing with laughter and stomping feet. As the crowd funneled out into the hallways, Ethan made his move. He intercepted Jordan near the locker room doors, stepping in front of him with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Well, Mr. Calm and Collected. "You ready to play round two?" Ethan said, his voice loud enough to draw a circle of curious onlookers. Jordan set his bag down slowly, his expression unreadable. "You sure you want to do this here?" "That's exactly why I want to do it here," Ethan shot back. "Whole school gets to see what happens when you mess with me." The students around them leaned in, phones already raised. A chant started from the back. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Sophie grabbed Jordan's arm. "Don't. You don't have to prove anything." Jordan gave her a reassuring glance. "I'm not proving anything." He stepped forward into the circle, his voice calm but carrying. "I'm only defending myself." Ethan grinned, cracking his knuckles for effect. "Good. Then defend this." He lunged, swinging a heavy right hand toward Jordan's face, but Jordan's training took over in a flash. He sidestepped smoothly, his arm snapping up to deflect the strike, guiding Ethan's momentum past him. The crowd gasped as Ethan stumbled forward, barely regaining balance. Before Ethan could turn, Jordan stepped back, raising his hands. "Stop. You don't want this fight." But Ethan was too far gone, his pride too raw. He charged again, this time with both hands, trying to grab Jordan by the shoulders. Jordan shifted, pivoting on his heel, and in one fluid motion used Ethan's own force to flip him to the floor. The gym exploded in shouts and screams. Phones caught every second as Ethan hit the mat with a loud thud, wind rushing from his lungs. He rolled to his side, groaning, stunned more by the shock than the pain. Jordan didn't move to attack. He didn't even step closer. He simply stood tall, arms lowered now, his voice firm and clear. "This is what you wanted, right? For everyone to see? Well, now they have. But here's the truth. Fighting doesn't make you strong. Control does, and you don't have any." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan struggled to push himself up, face red, eyes darting at the phones recording from every angle. His chest heaved with fury, but his body refused to cooperate. He had been bested, not by fists or brutality, but by discipline and restraint. Coach Harrison finally pushed through the crowd, voice booming, "Enough! Everyone, out! Show's over." Students groaned, but obeyed, still clutching their phones, already whispering about the videos they'd post later. Sophie stayed close as Jordan picked up his bag. "You didn't even hurt him." "You could have, but you didn't." Jordan nodded. "That's not what strength is for." Across the gym, Ethan sat slumped against the wall, humiliated. For the first time in years, he wasn't the one people feared. He was the one they pitied. But humiliation is a dangerous seed, and while Jordan had won the crowd's respect, Ethan was left with a decision that would determine what kind of person he became next. The following Monday at Ridgeview High felt different. Students still whispered about Friday's showdown, but their tone had shifted. For once, Ethan Collier wasn't at the center of admiration. He was at the center of pity. Clips of him lunging and crashing to the floor had already made their way onto Instagram and TikTok, spreading far beyond the school. His swagger in the hallways had evaporated, replaced by downcast eyes and clenched fists. Jordan Matthews, on the other hand, walked through the halls with the same calm stride he always had. He didn't bask in the attention. He didn't brag. If anything, he seemed more focused on blending in. But the looks he got told a different story. Respect, curiosity, and in some cases, gratitude. Students who had once avoided Ethan's path now whispered that maybe, just maybe, Ridgeview High had finally changed. Sophie caught up with Jordan by his locker. "You know people are calling you a hero, right?" Jordan shook his head as he shuffled books into his bag. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who stood up without losing control." Sophie tilted her head. "Still sounds like a hero to me." He smiled faintly, but didn't argue. He knew the truth. His victory wasn't about beating Ethan. It was about mastering himself. That afternoon, Mrs. Daniels called both boys into her office. Ethan slumped in the chair across from Jordan, eyes fixed on the carpet. He looked smaller than usual, like the weight of humiliation had finally cracked through his armor. Mrs. Daniels folded her hands on her desk. "I've been at this school for 15 years, and I've seen more fights than I can count. But what I saw on Friday wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson. Jordan, you showed restraint most adults don't have. Ethan, you let pride control you. Both of you are at a crossroads. How you move forward will define you." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. For once, he didn't have a smart remark. He muttered, barely audible, "I messed up." Jordan turned toward him, calm as ever. "You don't have to stay messed up. You can change." The words weren't mocking. They weren't smug. They were simple and genuine. And for a moment, Ethan actually looked up, searching Jordan's face for sarcasm. But there wasn't any. The silence stretched before Mrs. Daniels dismissed them both, reminding them that respect was earned, not taken. Later that week, during lunch, Ethan walked into the cafeteria alone. The usual crowd that once followed him had scattered, drifting to other tables. He carried his tray awkwardly, scanning for a place to sit. For the first time in years, he wasn't in control of the room. Jordan noticed from across the way. Sophie leaned closer and whispered, "He's all by himself." Jordan thought for a long moment. Then he stood, tray in hand, and crossed the room. Conversations paused as everyone watched, expecting another confrontation. Instead, Jordan set his tray down across from Ethan and sat. "You don't have to eat alone," Jordan said simply. Ethan blinked, startled. His pride wanted to reject the offer, to push back like always, but the exhaustion on his face said something else. Finally, he nodded once and muttered, "Thanks." The cafeteria filled with whispers again, but this time it wasn't about humiliation or spectacle. It was about change. Students saw something bigger than a fight. They saw forgiveness, growth, and the possibility of respect where there had once been only fear. In the weeks that followed, the tension at Ridgeview began to soften. Ethan didn't transform overnight, but he stopped seeking attention through cruelty. And though Jordan never claimed to be a leader, his presence left an undeniable mark. He'd proven that true strength isn't about fists or intimidation. It's about control, patience, and the courage to stand firm without tearing others down. The story of Jordan and Ethan spread not because of the fight, but because of what came after. It reminded students that discipline carries more power than pride, and that sometimes the bravest act isn't striking back, it's holding back. As Jordan once told his mom, strength is knowing who you are and not letting anyone take that away. And maybe that's the lesson Ridgeview High needed most. So if you're watching this right now, ask yourself, when life puts you in front of someone trying to knock you down, what kind of strength will you show? The kind that lashes out, or the kind that rises above? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that remind us how every choice carries weight, and how every action has the power to change more than just one life.